So I'm here with Hibbard-Swanson of Marion Polk Food Share Youth Farm.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Yeah. It was nice to see everything we got going on here.
Thanks for helping the peppers to eat.
No problem. No problem. Yeah. I guess could we just start with kind of your story about how you got onto this farm and kind of.
Yeah, sure. So I don't come from a farming background, kind of city kid, and didn't really garden much as a kid either. But like a lot of people these days, where I grew up with a concern about the environment and what's happening in terms of like habitat destruction and climate change, kind of attuned to those issues, and that kind of in a backwards way ended up being my into the food system, where I started to think about like what the impact of my food choices was on the greater environment and world around us. And so when I was in grad school, I was studying environmental ethics and really kind of took a deep dive into concepts of sustainable farming and agriculture, and what our ideal relationship to the natural world should be, and a big part of that relationship is farming. So I started gardening and growing food for myself, sort of community garden scale, and then just really kind of got the bug where I liked being outside, I liked working with plants, I enjoy hoeing a 100-foot row of beans, like that's fun for me, and I feel good about it at the end of the day.
It's a hard thing to turn back away from.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because some people feel the exact opposite. They do it once and they're like, never again. But I did it once and I was like, that was really satisfying. And I feel like I got something to show for my effort, and I get to eat something out of my effort, and I feel better about eating that food than other food that was cultivated in another way that was maybe more damaging to the environment. And so kind of worked my way in and got interested in it that way. And then how I actually got into farming as a vocation or profession was, so I come from a teaching background, but I was volunteering with the Marion Polk Food Share Regional Food Bank here in Salem, and was teaching kids about gardening, and started working with some teenagers that were interested in doing a bigger scale beyond gardening, actually production farming.
Switching from like a hobby
to
well, not like employment, but more professional, production focus.
Right, where we're growing more than just what I would eat at home, way more than I would ever eat at home. So we built this program from that inspiration of those first few kids that we had that wanted to grow food sustainably to give back to their community. Awesome. And yeah, I've been doing it for 7 to 8 years now. And
how many kids came
initially?
The initial program?
Yeah, initially we had there was 7 kids at the very, very beginning, who, kind of like me, they were concerned about the environmental impact of our food choices, and kind of felt as teenagers like, well, what can we do? Of course, you can change your diet, but that's only one person, and then they can advocate for big policy changes, but they can't vote yet, and their voice is small. So choice they made was like, well, what can we do with our summers? And so they kind of had this idea of growing food, using organic practices, learning about how food can be grown sustainably, and giving back, donating to food pantries in the area to provide some fresh, healthy produce to folks who need it in the community. And that first year we grew on about 3/4 of an acre. We had a lot of challenges because I was not a professional farmer and neither were they. And we made a lot of poor choices in terms of like pest management and crop choice, crop planning. But we still grew about 2,000 pounds to 2,500 pounds, I think, in that first year. We grow like 10 times that now. We've gotten a lot better, but we're still learning every single year. We make, I think every farmer does, but especially not coming from a professional farming background or didn't study horticulture or anything. Every year is a learning experience. If you think about like how your single individual life has an impact on the natural world, there's lots of ways, like your transportation choices and your entertainment choices or your clothing choices. Everything has some impact, but people tend to focus on like wildlife issues and things like that. But really, like the main way that humans interact with the natural world is, of course, through agriculture. It's a day in, day out operation where like each person, yeah, right. You're eating 3 times a day, and the food that you're eating comes from, I don't know how many acres of land. So each person is responsible for, really, through the choice they make of what to eat, it's responsible for the choices, agricultural choices that are made on hundreds of acres of land. And so, we tend to focus on like Yellowstone or Yosemite as being these pristine natural areas, but really there are natural areas, i.e. farmland, that you impact in a much greater way through your choices every single day. So if you want to have a positive impact on, on climate change, for example, you're gonna be much better off, you're gonna have a much greater impact if you think about food. And because that's something that you're engaged with every single day. Also, it touches on so many other things, and like social justice, where the food system itself leaves so many out, including the people who are working in it. So here in the Willamette Valley, we have a lot of people working on farms who never get to eat the food from those farms. And that's another thing. If we engage in the food system and find ways to grow food locally that can be shared locally, and we can employ people with fair wages where they can enjoy a healthy diet. We can have an impact on social justice as well as environmental justice through our food choices and being more actively engaged in the food system. Because it's not just about consumption, it's about actively participating in it to help grow some food, which is what these kids are doing. Most of them are not going to go on to be farmers. That's not their calling necessarily. But they've learned skills to where like they can produce some food locally to be shared with their neighbors in the future. And that's pretty cool, I think.
I think, I agree, because even if it's just a little bit everywhere, most gardens produce more than the person tending it can eat, and so any little bit is going to help. And if you're connected into the community, you're growing where you live, then food becomes a lot more accessible. Yeah,
and the food that we grow in gardens in this area is, anywhere really, is expensive to buy in the store often, but easy to grow and cheap to grow at home if you've got the skills and the space to do it. And so like some of the folks that we're distributing food to, they're able to stop spending money or their food stamps on fresh vegetables, which can suck up all of their food budget. We ease that demand. They get a lot more healthy food from here, and then they can buy some of the staples that we can't grow. So a little bit of gardening is what I'm trying to say. A little bit of gardening goes a long way in terms of someone's health and their diet.
Right, because we're growing high nutrition, high value, high cost, that kind of thing. And we're not supplying rice, but if you can save $3 on a bunch of beets, then you can now buy 2 pounds of rice, or whatever.
And when you're short your food budget is short, the beets are going to be sacrificed, and you're going to be eating just the rice or whatever, or just the ramen noodles or whatever the convenience food is. And so we can have a big impact on folks' diet just by giving them that like highest density nutrition, the highest cost item, putting that in their diet. The Marion Food Share is a regional food bank for Salem and the surrounding 2-county area, and our main business is emergency food. So we support more than 100 food pantries or meal sites in this region with most of their food needs, and they're serving altogether about 46,000 people a month. It's about 9 million pounds of food a year that goes through our warehouse. And that's a constant need, a growing need in our community, that we have a fundamental belief that everybody deserves food. Doesn't matter what your background is, what your story is, how you end up in need of food assistance. We want to be there to make sure you get it, because no one deserves to be hungry, basically. But that being said, that's emergency work where it's always like trying to step in at the last second and help someone in a desperate situation sometimes. And we are really interested in finding ways to change the environment, to change the system, so that there are fewer people needing access to food pantries.
Just food supply, not so much food emergency.
Right. And that can take a lot of forms. There's like policy work, obviously. We have a huge network of community gardens. It's one of the largest networks in the state. We have 60 plus gardens that we support where folks can sign up for a free plot, and water, seeds, and starts are provided, and they can grow food for themselves. We do garden education. We do other food system work to support local growers and farmers markets and things like that. And then we started this program 7 years ago as a way to engage young people in all of that work and to grow some supply of fresh produce. And that, so we talked a little bit about the youth aspect of how teens have gotten involved, but the distribution side of it, we've focused in the past 2 years on a prescription vegetable program. So in the food supply, when folks are food insecure, the place where they can get the cheapest calories is often through convenience foods or fast foods, or like ramen noodles is a great example. And there's a lot of diet-related disease amongst folks who are food insecure because they're eating this calorie-dense but nutrient-poor food.
Basically just calories and sodium.
Yeah, no vitamins or minerals or phytonutrients, and they're suffering. Their health is suffering because of it. So we've partnered with some health clinics to come up with some different solutions to that problem, and one of them is this prescription vegetable program, where if a dietitian is seeing a patient who's food insecure, has a desire to eat more fresh foods, and that's key. They have to want to do it. They have to enjoy beets and spinach and kale, be willing to
cook some stuff,
cook that.
Chop some things.
Yeah, not everybody has the time to do that. They have a lot of stresses in their lives. But there are a lot of households out there where people say, like, hey, we want to cook these fresh foods, we just can't afford them right now, and our health is suffering because of it. So the dietitian prescribes them a share of farm produce from us, and they become members of the farm, like a CSA, and they pick up a box a week during the growing season of 8 to 12 items of produce, so a bunch of beets and 2 heads of lettuce and a quart of strawberries or whatever that we have, and get some recipes to go along with it, and storage tips in case it's stuff they're unfamiliar with, like kohlrabi or fennel or whatever. And we're serving about 60 households this season through that program, from this farm. And then in addition, all of our youth farmers take home a share, so they get a sample of the produce as well too. So this year we're up to about 105 shares that we're packing and delivering out.
So you're serving 60 of them, and then the other.
So we're serving 60 through the prescription program. Right. Then we have like 20 or roughly that are going out to our farm crew, to the youth farmers and the interns. And then we have a few retail shares. We do sell a few, and then we have some that are going to market to be sold at the farmers market. And so that's the 105 number is where that's coming from. And then we donate excess that we have over to food pantries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So is all the food, like the you're saying like 25,000 pounds or so? Mm-hmm. Is that all going into those shares and being distributed that way?
No, so that's
other than like that excess that you're saying, like those go to the pantry.
So the excess goes to the pantry. Yeah. So if I had to guess, I'd say like, I don't know, maybe like between 15 and 18,000 pounds is going to the shares, and then we just have a lot extras. Like this week, summer squash is just booming right now. Yeah. So we sent a couple 100 pounds over to a pantry this morning. We loaded up the truck with like radishes and squash, and we had extra poblano peppers, and we had like 3 totes of probably like 100 heads of lettuce or something that we had extra, and we just shipped it straight over to a pantry.
That's kind of cool. Like you still get to retain some of the parts of a, since it's not for profit, you're still retaining some of the kind of gardening and growing beyond your consumption, where like a business is trying to have a market for everything they're growing and not exceeding that, and you've kind of got this we're serving these CSA members, but we also know just pump out a bunch of food and we can
find a destination for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know a lot of I've talked with a lot of for-profit farmers to learn from them over the years, a lot of commercial farmers. And that's, it's often a problem that they're, at the end of the farmer's market, there's this principle at the farmer's market, you bring way more than you're ever going to sell because nobody wants to buy the last sad bunch of kale in your basket. Mm-hmm. So you bring like twice as much kale as you think you're ever going to sell. And then what do they do with it? At the end of the day, they spend all this money to produce the scale, but they can't sell it.
Yeah.
So we have a convenient, we're not in the business of selling most of what we grow.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like, well, we can always send it to a food pantry, and we can be pretty certain that it's gonna move there, so it's not wasted.
Yeah.
If we can pick it, that's another challenge, though. Sometimes a crop gets away from you, and you can't keep up on it. You can't keep it picked. We definitely have that happen. We just had to till in some kale the other day that we just couldn't keep up on picking it, and then it got really hot, the bugs got to it, and on Thursday when I looked at it, it was great, and on Monday after a heat wave I looked at it and it was terrible, and it was like we just missed the window. We had to till it in. Anyways, side story.
Yeah, but neat. Okay. Has it always been on this location?
No, so we moved here at the end of 2015. We broke ground. We're here on the campus of Chemeketa Community College in Northeast Salem, and we have a great partnership with the college. We have a free lease on this land to run this program, and we partner a bit with some of their horticulture program and some of their community service efforts. So it's a active, sort of learning lab for some of their horticulture students. But that partnership's relatively new. About half of the history of the program was at a different site at the Oregon School for the Deaf, which is closer into central Salem. And we started with 3/4 of an acre there, and then we grew to about 1.5 acres. And we just didn't have a lot of infrastructure at that site. There wasn't space to build new greenhouses or a pack shed. So we were really kind of like, we had garden hoses out under some trees spraying down produce, and we kind of outgrew it pretty quickly. We actually had great soil at that site, and I loved the location. We were really close to downtown, so we went to the Saturday farmers market, and it was like a mile away. So we just loaded up the pickup, and if you forgot something, you could be back in an instant. Go back to the farm and get some more beets or whatever. But we had no cold storage there, for example. So it made it challenging to grow to have a market farm without some of that infrastructure. So here we've been able to, we built a pack shed where we can, be undercover while we're spraying down produce. We have a walk-in cooler, so we have cold storage. We have, a bathroom of all things. That's pretty key. Kitchen, and we just got a lot more.
Kind of nice.
Shade structure to sit out with our farm crew and take a break, have lunch out here. So it's nice to be able to build from the ground up a new site and really have 3 years of experience.
And then starting over, but not starting from fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, starting over, but having seen we really need X, Y, or Z, and so when we start that new place, we could put that in from the beginning. So.
Were you involved in the land search process, or was it really just kind of you were sponsored at the one college now, or at the one school, and you've now been sponsored here, and that was?
Yeah, I was involved a little bit with the land search process, but it's kind of like as you're describing, where we, as a nonprofit, we really needed
a lot less choice, and it really just became.
Yes.
It wasn't just, here's places you could farm. It was really just, this is someone who will give it to you.
Right. Yeah. So we had we were working with a few partners to locate that space, and it's a years-long conversation with the college before it sort of worked out, and it's we had to find that right fit, where what our program was, what their needs were, the right leadership in place at both organizations to partner on that, and get a formal contract together or lease together. So it took several years, and there were some other locations, but it really worked out here because the college already had an ag-related program they were looking to grow, but they didn't have the faculty to the staff to manage a farm. It's a lot of work, and they had instructors who have the knowledge but aren't paid to just go out and farm.
Yeah, they're paid for the class.
Yeah, not the class time, not the weeding time or tractor time. And we were kind of in sort of the opposite position, where we had staff like me who were being paid to actually run a farm, and we just needed the land and some of the educational partnerships. So that's been it was just a good fit.
we're still, we're still in Salem and we still have development around us, but
we're
not downtown like it sounds like this last place was.
Yeah, well, it's funny. The urban environment is challenging in different ways than the rural environment. We don't have any deer here, for example, which I know a lot of commercial farmers I talk with who are out more in the country. It's a huge pest for them. So we, at our previous location, we were closer to downtown, but it was gated. The whole thing was surrounded by a fence because it's a closed campus. And didn't realize how nice that was until we didn't have that. So we're here in Northeast Salem, which we are kind of on the outskirts of town. We're actually not even in Salem proper. We're on county land out here. Okay. But it's high density living around here.
Like it doesn't look quite rural. Like I didn't know you were outside the city limits, but it definitely doesn't really quite feel like it.
No,
highly developed county.
Yeah, there's apartment complexes all around here. There's thousands of people living within a few hundred feet of the edges of our farm because there's so many apartment complexes around here in a big neighborhood back east of us. And so the biggest way the urban environment impacts us is just foot traffic. We're not gated here. We get a lot of people walking through. Just cutting through, going up to the college, going over to the shops on Lancaster. There's apartment complexes back on that side of us to the east.
Not all of them have like the privacy.
Yeah, and even if they do have the fences, people cut it. And they'll take wire cutters and open up that chain link fence and make a cut through, and then it takes a while for us to figure it out or for the security to figure out and patch it up. And we get dog walkers all the time. So we've had some theft, some vandalism. Not so much that it's a huge problem, but we do get people like walking through beds of newly seeded crops, and we'll see footprints, and you're just like...
That's one of the things that I've kind of been noticing is like, there's kind of the more dramatic side of like being wary of theft or something, but really, not that it doesn't happen, but it seems like really more of the damage is just simple traffic, just people ignoring beds.
They just don't know
or something.
They don't know.
This is just a plant compared to that's just a plant, and what does it matter?
And they're like, oh, they got so many, or people will pick things sometimes. We had somebody we do get people who are like camping out, they're transient, who decide to like take up residence for a while. So we had somebody in our hot pepper hoop house. I don't know how long they were there before we realized it. And we got here one morning and we thought we saw somebody running away. And then we walk in the hoop house and there's like, they'd taken a piece of plywood, scrap wood we had sitting out, and they just smashed like a dozen pepper plants on top of a bed in the hoop house. And then they had stuff everywhere, and they were just sleeping in the very back of the hoop house, and we hadn't noticed it for days. There's like fast food wrappers everywhere and all. So that's the definite downside is just there's more people, and people aren't respectful of farming or don't understand what's going on. And so they can be intentionally or unintentionally damaging to crops and equipment. So I get like, the tractor hazard lights are often on in the morning when I get here because somebody thought it would be fun to hop on the tractor and like push a bunch of levers or something. And then the key's not in there, obviously, so they can't drive off with it.
But somebody's been messing around.
But you get here and you're like, somebody's been here, somebody's been messing around with the tractor again. So that's one thing. Then other than that, like, I'm trying to think about like, more agricultural things. We probably get a lot more pollinator action just because of some of the urban beekeepers that are around, and not so much in the apartment complex side, but out in the neighborhood. So we do have one honeybee hive here, but I know Salem has quite a few, hobby beekeepers around. So I think that's one thing.
You're northeast. I interviewed someone east, Flying Bee Ranch. You know them.
Not too far away. Yeah, not too far away. So.
Okay, I didn't see you. I interviewed him about a month ago, so you weren't on the map at the same time.
Oh yeah. They're not. I'm trying to think. They're actually pretty darn close. I think they're not too far away.
So maybe even some of his bees.
Yeah, they could be out here. Yeah, who knows? Yeah. I also think sometimes about like pesticide drift and stuff from the groundskeepers at the apartment complexes and the college. But it's a concern for rural farmers as well. You got to know your neighbors and know what they're doing. So I know they're not organically maintained, some of the properties around us.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern of mine sometimes about what exactly is happening.
I remember living in one of those, it's very similar kind of apartment-y townhouse, and just one day just seeing like a real yellow strip of grass and like, oh, so that's how they're taking care of that.
Yeah, exactly. That's how they maintain their fence line. One thing I have thought about that more recently is just aesthetic standards when you're in an urban environment. So like we've put in a hedgerow that's only a couple years old, so it's still pretty small. But the intent of a hedgerow is that it gets kind of wild and woolly. It's kind of the point, because it's habitat and it's a windbreak and it's pollinator ground, and so we let stuff go to flower and go to seed, and we let wildflowers bloom. And there's some shrubs that are pretty scraggly, and we mow it once a year, and we mulch around our trees and stuff that are in there to give them a leg up. But it doesn't look pretty by the landscaping standards of the college. It looks like an unmaintained mess.
Yeah.
And we get rodents in the hedgerow. We get ground nesting wasps in the hedgerow, and I'm okay with that because that's just habitat. That's what you expect, and it's part of the ecosystem of the farm. And I'm a big believer that those hedgerows are in the end going to reduce pest pressure. Can't say that. Reduce pest pressure. But I haven't gotten any pushback from the surrounding complexes and college now. But I anticipate that could be a problem as the hedgerows get bigger and they get a little rougher around as they get taller. I had public safety officers the other day expressing some concern about that.
Yeah, they like being able to see up in there.
Exactly.
For the same reason as the guy in your hoop house.
Yeah, they want to be able to see who's camping out or whatever, and the more like little nooks and crannies you have. So, I think that's something to consider in an urban environment, is like how much time are you going to put into landscaping and manicuring your property to satisfy your neighbors or the standards of the neighborhood.
External expectation pressures.
Yeah, and how much are you going to say like, hey, this is farming. Sometimes it's not as pretty as landscaping grounds, but that's because we're growing food, not trying to maintain a landscape. Yeah.
Cool. What about that transportation? I know you don't have as much of a market here. You say you go to one market because it's fairly close, right?
Yeah, we go to one farmer's market. It's actually over in West Salem, so it's kind of it's on the other side of town.
I had the wrong impression.
Yeah, well, but it's not far compared to like some of the farms that come and visit the Salem Saturday Market downtown. They're coming from Lebanon or Canby or whatever, and points quite remote from Salem. So we're still, it's like 4 miles away or whatever. And the health clinics that we visit, the pantries and all, they're all within a 5-mile radius of here. And the food share is like 4 miles away, the main warehouse. So we we're pretty close, so we don't spend a lot of time on the road to get our produce to market. But we do, we have a pickup, and we have a box truck that we can borrow from the main warehouse to get our stuff to the different markets that we use. And so transportation's pretty straightforward there. For our farm crew, our teens, there's a lot of bus service they use and biking, and so it's being urban. An urban farm is pretty convenient for transportation reasons, that we don't spend a lot of time on the road.
Yeah. So, okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm able to bike to work too, which is awesome.
That's always nice.
Yeah, we were really inspired by, there's a program on the East Coast, a much older youth farming program called the Food Project in Boston. And a big part of their mission is bringing together youth from different parts of the socioeconomic demographic spectrum. So kids from inner city Boston and kids from the suburbs and different races and cultural backgrounds and all that. And that's, an explicit part of their program is to get those kids to work together and to learn to communicate across differences. And we have that here too. We've got, kids from, wealthier parts of town and from, less well-off parts of town and different ethnicities and languages at home and all of that. And They start off being, sticking with their groups, and we make sure to split them up and send them out in the field in different groups, and you got to talk to somebody, so you learn to work together and learn to talk. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do. Yeah, for sure. Well, there's lots there. I think one thing that I've had to grow into as a manager on the farm is thinking about, like, looking at the big picture, is like a question of a few different prioritization, and like waste would be two I'd talk about. So like prioritization first is it's easy when you have a small scale, very small scale operation, you can just get it all done, and it's all within your capacity to get like everything on the to-do list done within a certain amount of time. Yep. And then as you grow, obviously you lose that, and you have to learn, like, what's the most important thing right now. I know I can't get everything done, but what's going to save me the most work later if I do it first? And it might not actually be the thing that seems like an emergency. So we have what we call sometimes like emergency weeding, where it's like the pigweed in the melons it's about to go to seed, it's out of control, we got to get in those melons and do it. And you're like, that might just be gone. Like, I have to let that one go, because in the same time it's going to take me to weed the pigweed out of the melons, because it's so big and the melons are vine crops, it's hard to get into without damaging. I might do a lot of damage, and I might spend 3 hours up there. In 3 hours, I could weed a half an acre of broccoli transplants with a hula hoe that just have little baby pigweeds coming up. Yeah. And I could prevent all of that pigweed and not damage any crop. Yeah. And you're like, all right, maybe it's time to till in the melons before the pigweed goes to seed. Or maybe I just accept that I'm gonna have a pigweed problem next year, and just keep the melons. So like that type of prioritization has been hard, and I mainly learned it since I haven't worked on other farms, is by visiting other farms and talking to them and seeing how they manage things, and realizing, like, whoa, I have to shift the way I'm thinking about my priorities. Like, sometimes I have to let things go and not get hung up on the pigweed and the melons, so I can do other things. And that ties into the second part, which is like being okay with quote unquote waste. I don't actually see it as waste, but I think like other people who aren't into agriculture would come and see this farm or other farms as being so wasteful, because there are crops that don't get picked. There are crops that get tilled under before they ripen. There are culls out of our harvest bin where it's just not up to quality, and we throw it away, or we compost it, and so we get that a lot with interns and with youth farmers who are just really concerned about, we really want to cut back on waste on the farm. We have to tell them, like, well, none of the organic matter on this farm is wasted. It's all consumed by soil microbes, or by compost pile biology is turning that into fertility for next year's crops. So it's not like we're throwing things in the landfill. It's that we're terminating crops when they're a problem, right? And rather than wasting our time and trying to fix something that's not fixable, or just accept it. Like, it's not worth going through the stunted broccoli field to get like the half pound of broccoli that might be there. Right.
Yeah, half pound of broccoli is not.
Yeah, and we had that earlier this year. Or like we were harvesting basil, and we got 3 weeks of really great harvested basil, where we sent out 100 and some bundles of basil every week and sold some at market and all this. And then it was getting overtaken by ground cherry, which is fruit, but it's also a weed because it comes back every year, or it will. It seeds itself. And we had some youth farmers who were like, we want to go and there's still more basil in there. We want to get more. And we're like, it's just time. Basil had its day in the sun. It's time to till it in. Sure, I could eke out some like lower quality basil, put more work in to get a lower quality product and not waste it. Or I could focus on the up and coming thing, and I could till that crop in or mow that crop down to prevent the weeds from going to seed. So that's been one over the past few years that I feel like I've learned as a manager, is to like make those tough decisions for the farm, and then try to explain that to other people, like why we're doing that. When they seem disappointed, they're like, oh, we were really hoping to get more basil out of that bed. And I'm like, well, it's basil's time was done. We're moving on. Now we got parsley this week. Let's focus on the good crop of parsley we got coming. So that's a big one. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've talked about managing, because there's so much about training and detail orientation. And
yeah, would you mind? Not a bunch, but especially in your position with, you've got kids and you've got a rotating roster of those kids, so like getting them quickly acquainted to the farming environment and how you kind of keep things going. I mean, they're very well functioning on that. Things are very much getting done, and we're not really doing it. We've gotten the tomatoes earlier today, but the peppers, but like not as much.
Right. Well, it's all training. You know, there's a lot to be said for early training and working. What I found sort of my management style with the youth farmers and with the interns is that when they start, I work really closely side by side with them, and then as the season wears on, I am able to back off more because I've been there from the beginning. So like the training up front is really essential, and not just training and telling people someone how to do it and then assuming they've got it. Like actually just doing it with them and doing it for them the first times they watch it. And I know that the beginning of the season, like the first 3 weeks of the summer to 4 weeks of the summer, I work as hard as they do in the field, and then that's going to save me a lot of time later in the season when I've done that training. The other thing is like knowing where the problem points are. So if you send someone to do a job, or you have someone working for you who's got a particular area of expertise, knowing what you need to follow up on to make sure there's not a crisis or an emergency. So like for us, some of those points are the irrigation is always one. There are lots of little details, and I said if I send someone to do a job on the irrigation system, I know that when they come back, I need to ask them, did you turn off the valve box before you left? Did you check the tubes to make sure there were no leaks? Did you X, Y, and Z turn off, if you took down some irrigation, did you turn off the hose at the front of the bed? Those are like the hot spots where I know people forget stuff, and it's a detail that matters. Like it matters a lot. Yeah. So earlier this season we had, and this happens every year, we had someone leave on a valve box to run drip irrigation on our cherry tomatoes, and we left on a Friday and they left it on. We didn't catch it until Monday morning. And those cherry tomatoes are still stunted from that one
like almost 3 days of straight drip.
Yeah, and that's way too much water, and it was standing water when we got back in on Monday. Yeah. And those, we washed all that fertilizer, just washed out all the chicken manure we put down. Basically, the nutrients just get washed out, and the plants, the roots are this hypoxic zone, and it's bad. So we're just now getting tomatoes this in August, and it's pretty late in the season. So that's an example of like as a failure, like. I didn't make sure that person had done that at the end of the job. And so that's one of the points where I know I don't have to do it, but I have to check on it every single time. And there are other examples like that, with in the packing, making sure that everything gets put back in the cooler because stuff easily gets left out, or finding those hot spots.
And I think the explaining why to them, because especially with this rotating crew, you see the results of these mistakes and forgetting and these different problems, and you know what kind of problem it poses to the farm, where they just they make that kind of accident, they do kind of see that result, but then they're gone and don't make that accident again, but they're also not here to not make it in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to be like, okay, so listen, someone last year
did this thing. Yeah. Well, and like sometimes it's a multi-year thing where like I see like the irrigation, want to go back to that, like when people flood a field like that can be a multi-year problem, to have that much water on it. Like we had one down in our southern field where the same thing happened one year, and we lost our entire potato crop, which really hurts because seed potatoes are so expensive, and it's such a bumper crop for us usually. But we lost that, and but there was brassicas in that field too, and the brassicas got hammered. Then there was pest pressure that built up because they were weak, stunted plants. So we had like tons of flea beetles moving in, and cabbage moths, and then those populations build up and lay eggs in the soil, and it's just like, if just one mistake of not, it was the same thing. It was over the weekend. Irrigation valve got left on. So I see the multi-year problem, and the other farmers out here see it, who are here long term, see it. But a lot of the rotating cast doesn't get to see that, so we have to try to explain it to them. Like, before you start a job, what will happen if you don't do this the right way is important. Yeah.
Cool. What are some things that you've noticed that have kind of been successful for your farm, whether it be like unexpectedly so, or just kind of some of the things that are really, really good strides for your farm?
I think some of the best choices we made in recent years have been, like the first one that comes to mind is just in crop selection, is that we have backed away from being the universal provider of all possible vegetables grown. Like, I think that's a CSA model that I experienced as a CSA customer, and it sounds great. You're like, we can provide everything, you know, from radishes to tomatoes and everything in between. And it's just hard. Like the managing, you know, we have 225 beds, 100-foot beds roughly on the farm, so we could grow 200 different crops, but we've had a lot more success in growing higher volume of 20 crops rather than 50 or 60 crops. And next year we're going to go even more in that direction and try to get it down to like 15 crops that we're going to grow. And yeah, you know, I think people think like the CSA customers are going to get bored, but people don't get bored of carrots. People don't get bored of tomatoes. They get bored of fennel. They only want it once. Or kohlrabi. They only want it once.
They're willing to experiment and try and tolerate one time and want to go back to their stables.
And it's okay to grow a few of those things maybe, but like, you know, it's way easier. Our yields have gotten higher as we've decided we're not going to try to grow everything under the sun. We're going to grow we're going to organize our field blocks in such a way that we can grow a lot of tomatoes in an efficient way. And maybe we'll have a bunch of different varieties of tomatoes, but they all get planted at the same time. They all get fertilized in the same way. They all get watered in the same way. The management decisions are all the same, but we still get variety out of that field. But it's there's no variety in our management decisions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
still some cultivar variety, but not management variety.
Right. Yeah. So you can do the same thing with brassicas, where you have you can grow like cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower and romanesco, and that are all roughly the same days to maturity. So you can plant them all at the same time. They'll get harvested within 2 weeks of one another, and you've got a bunch of different varieties of brassicas. And then that field block can all get transitioned out into a new crop. That's whatever is going to come next. Some lettuces or something. So that's been pretty successful for us. I think another thing, I'll pick one more maybe, that we do that I'm kind of proud of is we're at this weird scale. So I know some larger farms that are larger than us, like 20 acres, which isn't a huge farm, but a good sized organic vegetable farm, that they're at a scale where they can't really use compost because there's just the equipment, machinery, and time involved to spread half an inch of compost over 20 acres is intense. And we've scaled up. So my background's in garden scale stuff where you just use a ton of compost. And I think as we've scaled up, we've managed to continue to devote time and energy to putting down a good amount of organic matter every year and managing that pretty well. So our organic matter levels are at a rate comparable to a good garden, and higher than a lot of organic farms that are just relying on cover crops and not spreading compost as well. So I think that's led to long-term soil improvement for us, because we had pretty poor soil to start, really low organic matter, like 2 or 3%, well, not terribly low, but on the low side, and like really low pH and just bad biology, and we've managed the soil to improve it over the past 4 years. So that has dividends. We've seen our yields go up because of that for sure.
Interesting. Okay. Not like definitely beyond just being better about farming, like you're definitely seeing fertility response.
Yeah, for sure. Like our plants are healthier. They're producing more. The weeds are also healthier. That's not as good on that one. We're working on that one. But healthy soil, weeds love it, just like the crops do. But yeah, I think the pest pressures are reduced as the plants are healthier. The plants are bigger and more luscious. Pepper field accepted. I know you're up there. That's not included in this brag. Peppers are not so healthy this year.
That's all right. I mean, they're gonna be late, but they're really gonna love bouncing back from the grass getting pulled away from them.
I hope so.
You can see them like they want to.
Right. They're sitting there. They're waiting for their time. They would need some sunlight.
So what do you see as one of the biggest challenges to urban agriculture, like on the horizon, kind of coming in to face this?
I think we have been lucky for the past 20 years that local food has been a fad and has been something people wanted to get behind in CSAs and farmers markets. And I think that's turning a little bit, which is depressing. I think it's not attracting a lot of new interest, and it's losing some interest.
Yeah, kind of reached saturation. Whoever's going to get in,
whoever's going to buy a CSA share has tried it,
done that,
and they've either decided it's for them or it's not for them.
And then we've got big organic. You know, like that's,
and that's one reason I think probably why it's
supplying a lot of the desire people had was like, I don't want this kind of conventional stuff. I don't really have options, and so the small farm had organic, but now we have big farms with organic.
And it's cheap and convenient.
Yeah, it's all exactly. You don't have to change anything. It's right back to where you used to. Your comfort zone at that supermarket.
And then there's like new things like imperfect produce coming along, which I think has its niche and does a good thing for what it's worth, but also takes away support from small urban farmers because people who would have purchased a CSA share maybe from a small farm are like, well, it's way more convenient if I get this year-round thing that's delivered to my doorstep, and I have like a little bit more selection, and I get fruit from California or whatever, and I still get to feel like I'm supporting a good cause because it's produce that would have gone to waste otherwise. And I definitely know some folks who were CSA customers in the past, not at our farm, but for other farms, and have channeled their support in a new direction for something like imperfect produce. So I think there's a lot of challenges, and I think that it's really, I keep coming back to like crop selection. I think it's been so important for us to like figure out what you can grow that fills a niche, that is a staple that people really love, and you can do well within your climate and your soil type, and that you have a market for. And it may not be a full diet CSA. That model is beautiful, but it's a challenge. It's very challenging for the farmer, and I'm not sure the market support is going to continue to be there. So we think about what sorts of things that are specialty produce items that are maybe a little bit more expensive, that our clients are, we have a special population compared to other farms, but what are some things that are maybe higher value that we can really try to specialize in and grow more of those and do a really good job of interesting varieties.
I do find it interesting, like that you do have kind of the different motivations, but ultimately the crops you're kind of focusing on are very similar to other market gardens. You're still looking for high value, like the quick cropping time. It's just the difference being other farms are trying to get the highest dollar they can for their goods, and you're trying to displace that in people's budget.
Right. Yeah.
So you're both aiming for those like over leveraged items.
Yeah. We want really happy customers too. That's our goal, is to have folks who walk away really happy with their produce. They want to eat it, they're excited about getting it, and they want to continue to come back and get more of it. And that often means finding something that they can't get elsewhere. So this year we focused in on hot peppers and really put a lot of time into those, into some poblanos and jalapenos, and we're trying habaneros and cayennes and some other hot peppers that our clientele really wanted. And it's been a great response. We're bringing in hundreds of pounds of poblanos, which we've never done before, and they're going out the door. So
I was kind of wondering how much what the crop selection was, if it was just your management kind of decision, or if they had some pull involved.
They definitely have some pull. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to decide what's going to work. But there's definitely some pull from our customers who we do a survey and ask them what they want, and we hear feedback like, this year one thing we're hearing, second year in a row we've heard, is people want squash blossoms. And that's a great example of like, man, I never would have thought of that one, first of all, because I just don't eat that.
I still haven't. I've seen them sold, and I've even sold them myself. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I've not made them.
No, I'm just not interested. I'm like, why don't you wait for the squash? That's where the real nutrition or the real weight and calories are. But it's hard to find.
Super perishable.
Super perishable. It's primed to have it local. You got to have it local and close to market. And it's something that they can't find elsewhere, and it's pretty high value for folks. And so we have a few customers requesting it. So now I'm thinking like next year, well, do we like look for some squash variety that's known for just being like abundant flowers, and we just don't let it fruit, and we just start cutting these male flowers all the time and sending them out?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't leaned too heavily into squash blossom production, but yeah, I bet you there's a cultivar out there that has great flowers and the fruit's kind of meh.
Yeah, right. But you don't grow for the fruit, so who cares?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have any advice for people who are looking to either start a small urban farm or just kind of get into urban farming?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just going back to what I was saying earlier about how the market is changing, and I think like, there's so much to say. That's advice for somebody starting.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we've run the gamut. Plenty of people definitely say like, go get experience somewhere.
Yeah.
Work for somebody else.
Yeah, I wish I had done that.
From them for a while. And
I wish I had done that. That's something I didn't do. That I thought like, I can figure it out on my own. And I'm in a protected market, so to speak. So I didn't get out competed because I'm not a for-profit. So I had like a bit of insulation from market pressures to help to learn.
Yeah.
But I could have saved myself and all the folks who work here a lot of pain by having gone and worked somewhere else for a while. I will say that the one challenge about that is like sometimes that's a long haul in underpaid jobs to get a job that itself is not necessarily going to pay very well. So there's maybe something to be said also for taking the plunge.
It's what balance are you comfortable with?
Right, and I took the plunge and it worked for me, but it might not for everybody. I would say like what I've seen with some folks that I've worked with who go on to try to start their own operation is like a lot of people who get into urban agriculture and small organic agriculture are motivated by high ideals, and they let their ideals outpace what they can actually do. And it's okay to not make the perfect choice every time in terms of your principles. Like that, if you want to be successful, you're probably going to have to trade off some of your idealism, because you're not going to be able to afford and support the perfect ideal solutions every time. So I think about some folks who, I've taken a permaculture class myself, and I really love permaculture design principles, but I think a lot of people build these sort of like castles in the air of these invented farms that have these perfect food forests and all that will require so little work, and they'll produce so much food. And those
Everything was thought out for 20 years.
Yeah.
And just implement the perfect plan.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, those things take time to develop, and it's great. That's a great goal to strive for. But what are you going to do to sustain your farm and your livelihood today? You can plant for the millennium, but you also have to feed yourself today. And how to strike that balance, I think, is hard. So I would encourage people to partially it's just the world I come from, but check your idealism. That's a problem I see a lot, is people, and then I've seen people fail because they didn't do that, and it's sad to me that they had great motivations and great ideas, but then because they aimed a little too high, that they couldn't pull it together.
I just personally, it's nice to hear you say that, because I've been designing my classes a little bit as kind of talk about it as if I'm trying to break the romanticism a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Farming's still a good endeavor. Feels good. You're doing good things. It's hard to say something bad about farming.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. It's not just it's amazing. I get to work outside. No. Yeah. You gotta be measured with it. You gotta be tactical in your approach. You have to
make some hard decisions, and it is a business as well as a fun vocation. So I think that's probably my advice to And that's tailored, especially for the sort of people that I have worked with who are attracted to coming to a program like this, that is inspired by high ideals. And then it's a learning process for them when they leave to say like, oh, here's where the rubber meets the road, that we actually need to have some income, or we need to have a crop right now, and how are we going to make that happen because these trees aren't producing yet or whatever. So
well, but that is why I'm glad to have this opportunity here, because it, like as you mentioned, it is a little bit insulated, and it's able to hold these higher ideals. And so it's able to be here saying, I'm trying to grow food for people, rather than all these other farms having to be like, okay, but I'm pricing my stuff, and so eventually it just prices itself out of the market, and it basically becomes a gentrifying force. Where here, that price has been eliminated because you're being paid from the organization, and the farm doesn't have to pay you. It's got to work well enough that they still see it worthwhile to run this program and everything. But it's just different, and you're able to actually hold up one of those ideals. Like, I want to bring food to people who need food, rather than sell my really fancy food to people who already have all the food. I have had some interns here who've gone to work at commercial operations who have complained about that shift, that it was so hard for them to adjust to, where they went from working for an ideal, a cause, to essentially feeding the well off, right? Their gourmet produce being like a lifestyle choice for people who have many options at their disposal. And they're like really trying to tackle that problem. Like, how do I find a job in this field where I'm not just feeding the well off and giving them like a fun farm experience and they come and pick up their share? Like, how can I be a real part of change in the food system, but not in the nonprofit world? What can a commercial operation do to really be feeding more people beyond that specialized class, maybe? Will, I've had you for a long time. Is there anything else that you want to say, you wish I'd asked? Kind of give it back to you, make sure you get fit in anything you want to.
I guess given our last little bit here, one thing we always tell people our interns when they interview with us, because it's often people who are in college who are just investigating a possible career in the food system or in organic agriculture. This maybe should go without saying, but it has to be said, that farming is hard. Like, that it is dirty. You will sweat like never before. Your back will hurt. Your hands will be blistered, and it is hard, but it's also really fun. So we have to prepare people who have maybe a romantic vision of what it will be like, that it is physically demanding, but it's also mentally very rewarding. I think it's spiritually rewarding.
It can be good work, but it's work. It's still definitely work.
Right. Yeah.